Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Crystal Garvin, and I am so excited that you are here to share in this Guatemala recap with us. I am here with my good friend, Abby Parker, and I just want to thank you for joining us to hear more about our trip to Guatemala. Of course, we were with doTERRA's Healing Hands Foundation, and our trip was February 12th through the 19th. So looking back, I'm just amazed really at how much we accomplished and how much we saw and all that we did as we interacted with each other and the local villagers and other locals that we met along the way, the natives there. Obviously, I don't have time to show you every picture and tell you every story because I do have about 1,000 photographs and you don't want to see them all. So I did try to narrow it down and just want to share an overview and some of the highlights with you. So this picture here is of me in the middle there, and then there's my husband on the left, and he is not going to be on live sharing with us, but he had a wonderful trip as well, and if you see him sometime, feel free to ask him about it. I'm very glad he got to go. It was a great experience for both of us. And then Abby Parker is our team member in Atlanta, and this was actually her second time going. So Abby, if you want to unmute yourself really quick, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and maybe share just a little bit about why you decided to go a second time, because I know that a lot of people asked you that on the trip, and I'm going to actually, maybe I have to do that for you, huh? Okay, sorry. Let me see if it'll let me do that. Nope, it won't let me do that without escaping out of the PowerPoint. Oops. So sorry for the little technical difficulty here. It is, oh, there we go. Okay, yay, let me do it. So sorry about that. Hi.
What did you want me to say?
Just introduce yourself and tell why you decided to go back to Guatemala a second time for the Healing Hands trip.
Okay. Hi, I'm Abby. I am in Crystal's downline through Amy and down through Lindsay onto me. I went last year. It was sort of a fluke. I went to get a sandwich at convention and walked up to the table and asked how I could go. And a pretty young blonde 12-year-old girl talked me into going to Guatemala, and it was Emily Wright's daughter. And then I just signed up and went. So it was very different from this year with the lottery and, applying, and then you had to pay by a certain amount of time, like on a certain date at this time, they're going to post the link and you apply. And it was a little crazy this year. But I was super blessed and excited to get to go back. I wanted to go back to Guatemala. I knew I wanted to go somewhere because I had such an amazing time last time. And I decided that I wanted to go back to Guatemala. The people there and the projects there and everything about it, I wanted to go back. I wanted to see them again. And, briefly, I told my team this at the end, but last year when I went, they talked about a guy who would walk 2 hours to Sika Bay and 2 hours home every day, rain or shine. And this year we met a lot of kids that would walk 4 hours to school every day because it's that important to them. And in praying and mulling over that all year long, I just kept thinking, what's that important to me? What would I walk 2 hours, rain or shine, twice a day, every day, because it's that important to me? What would put me that far out of my comfort zone? And it was Guatemala. It's doTERRA. It's Healing Hands. So that's why I went back.
That's awesome. Well, I loved what you said that, the villagers probably don't see many return participants on these trips, and you had the opportunity, you could have gone to Nepal or somewhere else on one of the other trips this year. And I am so glad that you went and that we were on the same trip together. That was a really fun surprise. And at first I didn't know if my husband was going to be able to go. I didn't think he was. So it was really fun to know that we would know each other and be able to experience this together. So yeah, thank you so much. And I know it meant a lot to them. And I can see myself going back as well for some of the same reasons. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my video so that we can um, just have the full experience here with the PowerPoint. And let me get up and do that real quick. And then if you want to do the same, I'm just going to kind of move the box out of the way. I'm actually going to have to exit to do that, and I'll go back to the PowerPoint. There we go. It's giving me some trouble. Okay, so let me do play again on that. All right, that's better. Okay, so I will talk some about our trip, and Abby, please just feel free to interject anytime you have a thought, because I know that you haven't seen this yet, so this is new to you, and please feel free to jump in and add your thoughts whenever you have anything to say in between slides. I'll kind of pause, so feel free just to jump in whenever you want to. But I'll talk a little bit about the purpose of our trip and the place that we went. So I was trying to define the purpose in just a phrase, and I came up with supporting partnership and providing service as ambassadors of doTERRA and Choice Humanitarian. So really our purpose was to be ambassadors and to provide service however we were asked. We didn't know when we signed up exactly what kind of service we would be asked to do. We just knew that we were going and would do what we were asked to do the best that we could, and just to be ambassadors of both doTERRA and our partner humanitarian agency, Choice Humanitarian. So we were, you can see, we flew into Guatemala City, and we then took a very long bus ride to the area where Sika Bay Training School is. It's a vocational training school. I'll talk more about that shortly. And it's in the Polochic region in the north central department of Alta Verapaz. And it's predominantly a Mayan area. They speak the Quechua dialect, so a lot of them don't even speak Spanish, although more and more of the younger people are being taught Spanish, and more of the younger people do speak Spanish, so that was helpful. But indigenous groups make up more than 40% of Guatemala's population. Poverty among the indigenous averages 79%, with 40% of them living in extreme poverty. Nearly half of Guatemala's children under age 5 are chronically malnourished. It's one of the highest malnutrition rates in the world, and about 17 million people live in Guatemala currently. So there's huge need there, and that is one of the reasons that Choice Humanitarian is there, and also why doTERRA decided to partner with them in this project. And of course, it's all about the cardamom, which we'll talk a lot about. So you can see that it was estimated to be 8.5 hours on a large coach bus, and then near where you can see San Felipe de Lara, that's where we switched over to smaller buses, and it was 2.5 to 3 hours more from there, with a Chiquita banana truck turning over in the middle of the highway, having a very bad accident, and other unforeseen circumstances. It took us anywhere from 10 to 12 hours on a couple of different buses, a larger one and then a smaller one. And this was very windy mountain roads. So we had our peppermint and ginger and sea bands and tried to look out the front window. Those were very long days. So we had a few days actually in the village, and then we went back to Antigua, which is close to where the distillation facility is. So just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of what you're looking at and where we were. And it is beautiful. It's a beautiful countryside. On our long drive, it was very scenic, so that was helpful. We saw lots of mountains. There are many volcanoes in Guatemala, lots of trees, a lot of people, and unfortunately a lot of trash along the sides of the roads, and that's a sad thing to see, but they don't have trash pickup at their curbside, and they don't have landfills where they can take their stuff, and even if there are some, a lot of them can't get transportation there. So that is a problem, and in some areas you could tell they take pride in it and they try to clean up, and in other areas they just don't have anything to do with their trash. So that is something that was sad to see in this beautiful country, but I'll touch back on that in a little bit. So let's talk about the partnerships that we're dealing with here. As you already know, doTERRA is committed to supplying the highest quality of essential oils, and making a positive difference in the lives of farmers, harvesters, and distillers who contribute to doTERRA's oil production. It's really amazing how much of a difference our company has made in less than 9 years in the industry, in poverty-stricken countries, with our partners. It's really just amazing to think what could happen in the next 9 years if they've already done this much. So we have more than 100 essential oils in our product line, and doTERRA sources those oils from 40 plus countries. More than half of those countries could be considered developing countries. So they want to ensure that small-scale farmers and harvesters in disadvantaged areas are treated ethically. And doTERRA introduced this initiative toward that end called Co-Impact Sourcing a few years ago. It is an initiative that seeks to develop long-term, mutually beneficial supplier partnerships while also creating sustainable jobs and providing reliable income in underdeveloped areas. So our commitment is to the ethical treatment of suppliers. We provide on-time payments at fair prices. The growers and harvesters are encouraged to form cooperative groups, and that allows them to share collective benefits and bargaining power. And all the while, they're improving their skills and capacity. And this entire process ensures that we continue the supply and the quality of our oils for generations to come. It's creating shared value. Our partnerships are making strides toward reducing poverty, all because we use and love and share our essential oils so much. So Co-Impact is generating jobs, ensuring fair labor, building up that capacity and longevity for our oils, giving those fair and on-time payments. And we have these long-term partnerships that have developed. And then also, I just love that they promote those cooperatives. Really, doTERRA could choose to do that and make more money, honestly, by providing a lot of that themselves, buying farms and providing services that farmers and growers have to pay for. But instead, we facilitate cooperative agreements and help them really to have a hand up. So it's not a handout, but it's teaching them better practices and helping restore dignity. We facilitate community development, and doTERRA is also committed to its promise of environmental stewardship. So that is some of what Co-Impact is about. And then we have the doTERRA Healing Hands Foundation, and it provides funding and resources to create community-based social impact projects, which improve lives in the larger communities where our oils are sourced. Past projects have included building or sponsoring medical clinics, installing drinking water, irrigation systems, building schools, and providing educational resources such as vocational training programs, which is part of what is going on in Guatemala. And then finally, we have Choice Humanitarian. So Choice Humanitarian, from their mission statement, their mission is to provide village-driven initiatives, build leadership capacity, have simple, appropriate technologies provided to people, gender equity with jobs, and they provide native in-country staff to run their operations. And they've been working to eliminate extreme poverty since 1983 through village-based initiatives in Bolivia, Ecuador, Guatemala, Kenya, Mexico, Nepal, and Peru. And Choice's vision is a world free from the ravages of extreme poverty, where all people are treated with dignity and valued for who they are and the unique contribution that they bring. Hey, Lindsay, if you wouldn't mind stopping your video real quick, that'd be great, just for the recording. Glad that you're able to join us. All right, so let's talk about cardamom. The production market for cardamom has historically been really unstable in this particular area, Alta Verapaz, the north central area of Guatemala. So 5% of the world's cardamom plants are distilled for essential oils, and Guatemala is the world's largest exporter for the spice market with cardamom. But Alta Verapaz farmers were not getting their fair share. And because this area is so remote, honestly, guys, this was the most remote mission trip I've ever been on. And I've been on several mission trips that I thought were to pretty remote areas. It was nowhere near as remote as this. Transportation up there is very difficult. So small farmers are often left with few options. They're typically forced to sell their cardamom to middlemen at lower prices, and then the middlemen resell the cardamom at higher prices. And this whole exchange leaves farmers in a really tight economic spot as they try to produce quality cardamom and make a profit. It's a really difficult proposition for them. So there's Abby and me right in front of a cardamom plant as we were exploring the mountainsides. I'm going to just, there we go. Sorry, I needed to move that out of the way real quick. Okay. So we traipsed all over the countryside to get to some cardamom and to get to see what it's like to be a farmer and harvester of these beautiful pods that look like this. So the benefits to the farmers are that they can earn predictable, stable income. They're getting resources, technical assistance, they're improving their growing methods, and then doTERRA turns around and invests back into their communities. And by partnering with doTERRA, cardamom growers receive all of these benefits, and additionally, doTERRA then is able to donate a portion of every kilogram of cardamom directly to their communities to build schools, hospitals, other community benefiting projects for improved livelihoods. So kind of the summary of that is the doTERRA Co-Impact Sourcing Initiative in Guatemala is giving these growers stability they've never had before. They're getting a much higher return for their production. Their livelihoods are improved, and they're getting better training so that we can ensure optimal quality and oil yield from the cardamom plants. So here are a few more pictures of us exploring the cardamom fields. Now, we saw some cardamom farms on our drive as well, and some of them we saw were clear cut first. So they were just clear cut fields with cardamom plants planted all over the place in like nice rows. And we don't do that. We don't teach our farmers to do that. And also a lot of the other farms in Guatemala use pesticides. So of course we have specific reasons why our farmers are taught differently. Number one, cardamom actually grows best in the shade. So it is best for it to grow in these jungled, forested areas with larger shade trees around them. And another reason is that when there's a specific insect that when it attacks cardamom, it actually makes the plant create more of a specific component that's really beneficial in our essential oils. And that's one of the reasons that we have such a special and unique cardamom oil. The plants produce best for 5 to 7 years, but they can produce up to 11 years if they're cared for well. So doTERRA teaches the farmers not to use pesticides to keep the cardamom plants grown in these shaded areas, and then also how they can care for them better so that they can last and produce longer. So it is, I'm being really general about the specific chemical component and the specific bug and the terms for that because it is a proprietary proposition for our farmers and for doTERRA and the partnership we have and how we are able to get specific chemistry for our essential oils. I just think it's really neat that God created this whole just synergy between the plant life and the insect world, and how actually it's a good thing to let the insects attack the pods because they don't break through, they don't destroy it, but they do cause the plant to create a different chemical component and structure. So it was really interesting and fascinating to hear about. So you can see here it's grown all over these hillsides, and we were kind of going up these muddy slopes. It's quite steep. It gets very muddy. It was less muddy this year than for Abby last year, I understand. So it wasn't as treacherous, but it was difficult for some people who aren't used to hiking through mud and on steep hillsides. And I loved it. It was so fun. I actually remember driving into the village at very early in the morning, and we had to leave at 4 o'clock that morning to get into the village on time due to some delays we had the night before. And again, you always have to be flexible on these trips, but I was praying on the way in. I just kept feeling like, I really hope our group, whatever group I'm in, gets to do cardamom first. I don't know why. I just have a feeling like that's the group I want to be in. And then I did get put in the group that did cardamom on the first day, and I loved it. And our group ended up hiking through these hillsides and muddy, steep mountainsides, probably 3 times longer than any of the other groups, because our guide, who you can see kind of helping someone across the bridge in the top right picture, this is his home area and he's used to it. And he was forging trails where trails did not exist and taking us in a zigzag all over the hills and cutting down limbs for us to clear a path. And it wasn't in the plan. So he was taking us farther and deeper into the forest than he was supposed to. There was just a little bit of a lack of communication or some kind of communication error. So anyway, I was really glad there was. We weren't lost by any means. He knew exactly where he was. He just didn't realize how soon we needed to be where we needed to be. And it was a lot of fun. So we enjoyed that very much. And one more slide with pictures of our cardamom experience. So you can see in the left, there's some dry leaves all around the base of the cardamom plant. That's actually where the pods grow. They grow from the base. And so the farmers are taught to go in there and clean out those dried leaves and any other debris to pull that away from the bottom of the plants where the pods grow, and that helps them to grow and clears space for them. The seeds get darker and they're black when they're ripe. So on the top right, you can see that's one that's not quite ripe, and it's a lighter green on the outside as well. So the pods get darker green and they really pop off easily when they're ripe. So Abby first gave me one that she found that was ripe and pulled out seeds and told me, eat them. And I was like, are you sure that's okay? And she's like, yeah. She was chewing on them. And they really just taste exactly like cardamom oil. That's where the oil comes from, is the seed. So that was a pretty cool experience. So she taught us how to find the ripest ones and which seeds were best to eat. So the white ones tasted like cardamom too, but not as sweet and not as full of a taste. So that was our cardamom experience. And then we got to see the drying facility. So I loved seeing all of the process from the seedlings to the mature plants, and then the drying facility, which is actually fairly new. So last year, Healing Hands and Choice built this new drying facility as part of the Co-Impact Initiative. And now farmers can dry their pods at the freshest point, and they increase their profits this way too. So it takes growers several days to harvest the plants. And a healthy shelf life of cardamom is typically only 3 days. So traveling long distances to a drying facility meant that the plants were often past their prime and they weren't at their peak freshness before they could be dried. Again, this is a really remote area. So with the establishment of this drying facility, cardamom growers in Guatemala now have resources to dry their plants immediately after harvesting in this region. And drying the plants at their freshest produces higher quality pods, and then the drying facility gives them that ability to transport their pods ready for distillation. So again, cutting out another middleman for them. That's really cost effective and profitable for them, for these small farmers to be able to have this facility. So this was a new facility that we got to see exactly where they dry the pods. And here's a couple more shots of that facility. So there's these large receptacles on both sides of the building. So there's 2 of them. They can have 2 big batches drying at the same time. On the outside, we've got that nice co-impact sourcing sign. And there were several bags of the dried pods ready for shipment, lined up against the wall. So of course, we're all oil dorks, right? So Lacey Graham coined that phrase, but we all are. So we all were just thrilled with this part of the process, just learning more about that. All right, so Sika Bay, you can see this beautiful building here. And Sika Bay is a word that in Quechua, the local tribal Mayan language, means seek your path. And the training here focuses primarily on breaking the cycle of poverty by teaching students of all ages different vocational skills. And it's a partnership between Choice and the doTERRA Healing Hands Foundation. So they provided the funding toward this venture to build a new training center. And it's located in the heart of Alta Verapaz. It focuses on some vocational skills that are very valuable to the community. Everything from construction to hospitality, agriculture. So there's a culinary arts, there's welding, there's now an electrician's program. It's really a state-of-the-art technical school. It's the only one of its kind in the region, and they are providing education and training for farmers and high school students ages 14 to 18 typically. So they're getting this increased education It's giving them opportunities, whether they want to stay in the community and find a better job there, or if they want to start their own business or move out of their area. But their in-country director with Choice is Jorge Chen and his staff. They have built this long-term program. So they're providing clean water, bathrooms, indoor plumbing, improved living conditions, healthcare, health worker training, and basic education for people really of all ages in their region. And his story was quite amazing. It's just all about his dream. Jorge was quite inspiring. So we got to see the graduating class of electricians, and we got to be present for their graduation, which was really an honor. And they were honored that we were there, and some of our team members gave out the certificates. And at first we thought, do they really want us here? And they delayed their graduation so that it could be while we were here. We were thinking, did they do that for us? They shouldn't have done that. And we learned that they wanted to wait for us to be there. They were so honored to meet the people who are helping to further their education. And just with our Healing Hands donations, that's something that we are all doing. And they loved having us there and being the ones to try to pronounce their names and hand out their certificates. So it was an honor on both sides. So this main building is where the dormitories are and where we had this ceremony. And you can see it from my husband's drone picture. It was really cool that he had his little selfie drone that he brought for the trip. And you can see on the bottom right, there are 2 areas marked out where they're going to be expanding and building more training facility buildings. So they've purchased some more land. But it was really amazing to hear Jorge's story and how he had this vision. He grew up in this region and he saw the extreme poverty around him and he wanted a better life. So he went on and became a lawyer. So he is a lawyer, but he didn't just want that for himself. He wanted the people in his home area to have those opportunities, to have better education and living conditions. So he went back and started working with Choice, and he had the dream and vision of starting this vocational school. And when some of doTERRA's executives were visiting to start the Cardamom partnership, they met him and heard about his vision. And it was really funny to hear it in his words. He talked about how Corey Lindley, our CFO, was there and asking him about his dream and vision and saying doTERRA might like to get involved in helping make this a reality. And he said he'd heard that from some other American businessmen along the way, and then they would go back to America and he'd never hear from them again. So he wasn't holding his breath. And about 6 months went by and he thought he was never going to hear from Corey Lindley again. And Corey called him up and said, so I've been talking with other executives and with others who could make this happen, and we want to fund your dream. Healing Hands wants to be a part of making this training center come to be. And he said, so we'll be there in 6 months to dedicate the building. Can you be ready by then? Do you have the plans? And he said he kind of more or less had an idea in his mind, but he really didn't have specific plans and schematics and blueprints and all of this, in hand. And Corey said, well, you need to have those things. You've got 6 months so to get it all ready. And he just kind of laughed and said, don't you love executives? But he did it. And he knew what he needed to do. And it was that important to him. So he started this training center and it's going to be expanding. And it was just so neat to think back. It's only been a few years since he shared that dream. And now here it is, and we're seeing graduating classes. So really wonderful to know that our Healing Hands dollars are hard at work in these hands-on ways that we get to see in a practical sense. So that expansion project down at the bottom right, in one of the projects we got to do involved that, and it was digging holes for fence posts, for a fence that's going to enclose that new area of land that was acquired. So we were able to go out and dig these fence post holes, and it was not easy. When they cleared the road that you can see off to the right in that picture on the left, they just kind of piled up all of the rocks and dirt from creating that road on the side, and we were having to dig through rocks and tree roots. And so they're just kind of putting the fence right there. There's not really anywhere else to put all of that dirt and rock. So we were digging through that, and I can't say that I was able to last more than a couple hours personally. And some of our team members did this all day long, but we did all get to have this experience. And you can see some of the local guys, once we got the holes dug, they were putting the fence posts in and measuring and getting the fence put up. So I'm sure that the fence is probably complete by now, a few weeks later. But that will be nice for them as they are adding these training buildings and planning in the next months to be building the new facilities to have the fencing around it. So there's Abby and me down at the bottom, and one of our other team members digging our fence posts. It was quite an experience to share together. And of course, one of the things we most loved was the village interaction. So I loved really Choice Humanitarian's whole stance on this was that we were going there to provide a service, and that was our gift. And so we were not to bring gifts. And that was different from other mission trips I've been on, where we brought candy and toys and honestly things that created more garbage and trash that the people did not have a place for and also wasn't healthy for them. So they encouraged us not to bring any gifts, but instead to bring things that we could do together with the locals. And it was beautiful. We loved it. It was such a neat thing to see. Instead of children coming after us asking for gifts and candy, they just wanted to spend time with us and see what we brought to do with them. And Choice did give us some great ideas. So our interactions included playing catch, chalk drawing on pavement, painting fingernails. I did a lot of fingernails, coloring pictures together, blowing bubbles, just walking and talking down the road together. The kids always wanted to grab our hands and walk hand in hand with us if possible. And then being invited into native homes just to see how they live and cook and what their daily lifestyle is like. So it was quite a neat experience. And here are some other pictures. This lady on the left is Maria. She's 85 years old and just such a beautiful lady with a wonderful smile that would light up a room. And she seemed to be everybody's grandmother. All of the children I met, they would say, oh yeah, she's my grandmother. So she came in and experienced some essential oils. That's what she's looking at on her hands. And then she would smell them, and she really enjoyed that and just talked to us and smiled. And everybody loved her. She captured a lot of hearts. And of course, the children did as well. They loved playing with us and getting fingernails painted, playing with the bubbles, throwing the balls. And on the top right, many of the local area women who create beautiful handicrafts and textiles. Some of them walked 3 or 4 hours to set up a little market for us on the day before we left the area. So that was really special to have them come and present that for us, and for us to be able to purchase things that were made right there in that local area. And here's just a few more. It was really hard for me to narrow down these photos, guys, but you can see how precious the children are, how beautiful they are. On the top right, a little girl was bringing her corn for her family to be ground. So there was one family in the area who owns a grinder, and everyone brings their corn to this person, and they pay a little bit, excuse me, they pay a little bit to have their corn ground. And corn is a huge staple in their diet. I think they have tortillas at every single meal. We visited a family where we figured out that the mother makes about 100 tortillas a day. So it was quite fascinating to watch her making them so quickly. And we tried, and they would stick to our hands and they would fall apart, and we ruined her tortillas. So it was fun though that they let us try. And then down on the bottom, there's my husband. He was flying his drone and taking some pictures like the one that you saw before of the expansion area. And so some of the local guys were really interested to see his drone and watch him controlling it and see the pictures that it produced. So that was another fun interactive toy that we had. And then we had the stove project. So previously the families in these areas cooked over open fires, and some of them still do, but on really small surfaces. So burns were very common, and of course smoke filled their homes. It causes a lot of eye and respiratory problems. So I'm going to try and attempt here to show a video about this. And I think this was actually taken from the trip that Abby was on last year. So I don't know if you'll spot her or not, but this is from their trip last year. So you'll see some of what they did and see some of the area that we were in, the same exact area. We did not get to fly in though, we took buses. But they did charter some small planes last year. I guess it wasn't the safest thing, and I don't know, the buses were, I did see Abby. The buses were apparently safer, and they still did have to take small buses up to the village itself, so they still got that experience. But I'll let you just watch and see some of the area and more about the stove project, and I hope you can hear it. Okay, so you can't hear it, and I don't know how to fix that. Thank you for letting me know that. So this is Rob Young, and he's talking about how they are helping construct these stoves with a flue so that the smoke gets out of the house. And the other advantage is they don't have to use a lot of wood in the ovens, and that's helping reducing the impact on the environment and saving them time and money from having to gather and purchase firewood. So it's a great program, and that's one of the ways that we use Healing Hands resources. So since you can't hear the people talking, I will probably just go ahead and skip past this part for the most part, but you can see this is hard work. We're picking at this hard dirt, and um, that it was sweaty, and it was just, hot, humid environment. But it was neat to get to be a part of it. And honestly, the people that Choice sends to do these projects are much faster and better at it. But we jumped in and tried to help as much as we could. It is hard labor, and it's neat though to be with the families. We saw their excitement. The people are really amazing and so friendly and gracious and just happy, and they were very welcoming to let us in and treat us like family. So the stove project is really a neat thing to help improve their health and also just reduce the impact on the environment and what they are having to actually spend on firewood. And they're able to now actually make more tortillas if they want to sell tortillas, for example. And so just a second, I'm going to just close out somebody's video real quick here, just because I don't want that on the recording. Okay, so the stoves measure about 4 feet long by 2 feet wide. They have a raised brick and a metal cooking surface. They cost about $55 in the materials, but the natives are not just given a handout. Again, the whole model of reducing poverty is not to give hands out, but to give hand up. So they have to work to pay for the cooktop itself, the top part, that metal part, and that's about $20, which is a lot of money for them. So they can work that off, they can work to make money and pay for that themselves. And the rest of the cost is covered by our Healing Hands donations, and Choice Humanitarian brings the rest of the materials and the workers in to install the new stoves. And there's an opening in the side that allows families to stoke the fire. And again, it doesn't take nearly as much firewood, so there's not as much waste. And then there's an attached pipe to vent the cooking smoke outside of the home. And the stoves only require about a third or so of the wood that was needed in their open fires. So that cooking surface heats really evenly, and it's much larger than what families were using previously, so they can cook more efficiently. They can cook more things at once, and a lot of the women are using their stoves to cook additional tortillas and then go and sell them, and that's giving their families additional income. So you can see how they mark out the area with the chalk, and then Abby and I down on the bottom left were helping to mortar in those concrete blocks, and then you can see the final project over on the right. So the final completed stove there in one of the homes, just to give you an idea of what that looks like. All right, so, oops, trying to move to the next slide. It doesn't want to let me. Okay, there we go. So we were really honored to also get to participate in a Days for Girls project. So Days for Girls' mission is to create a more dignified, free, and educated world through access to lasting feminine hygiene solutions. And they believe that every girl and woman in the world with ready, feasible access to quality, sustainable hygiene and health education should be a goal by 2022. So 2022 is their goal. And doTERRA has partnered with them and has been their largest donating partner. And if you've been to doTERRA's convention the last couple of years, you've heard some of the stories and probably, like me, cried when you heard about these problems that the girls and women in these areas face. Because if you just think about this, if you are a woman, what if not having sanitary supplies meant days without being able to go to school or days of being isolated? So, some of the girls use leaves, mattress stuffing, newspaper, corn husks, rocks, a piece of cardboard that they just sit on in their homes, on their dirt floors, anything they can find. But they still miss up to 2 months of education or work every year because they don't have a sustainable way to take care of the menstruation at their time of the month. So it turns out this issue is a really instrumental key, and it's kind of surprising, but it's a key to social change for women all over the world. So we were so excited when we found out that we would get to participate in one of these Days for Girls events and distribute these kits. So we had a room of about 40 schoolgirls that we were going to their school, and then girls and women just kept filtering in, and they kept coming until that room was packed with about 100 bodies, and or probably more, 100 native bodies. And then there were the women on the trip, so the Wellness Advocates and doTERRA representatives, and there were like 15 or so of us, I think, so 15 or 20. So we had about 100, and you can see there's babies and grandmothers and young girls who were actually in the school and older girls, and we were able to have enough kits to distribute to everyone who was of menstruating age. So thankfully we did have extra kits with us. And you'll see on the left there, our events coordinator at doTERRA, Alyssa, did also have a demonstration of self-defense. And so Scott, who was with Choice Humanitarian on the left, he was not in the room during the talk about what a uterus is and how our bodies work and why we have menstruation, because quite honestly, we don't know if these women have ever been taught that. And we want them to know it's normal. So that's a part of the Days for Girls program. And then after we have talked about that and shown them how to use what's in their kits, which is 8 reusable pads, and there's also underwear and a casing for the pad and a bar of soap and Ziploc bags, and we teach them and show them how to wash everything and keep it sanitary, and it's all put together in these nice bags that really are cute. They could be worn as a little backpack on the back or carried around like a purse, and no one would necessarily have to know what's inside of them, but it's their kit that they can take with them to school or work or have at home or wherever they need it. And then they have enough to last for days so that they can clean them in between. And we demonstrated all of that for them. But then we also had Scott come in, and it was really powerful from a man's perspective. He talked about their self-worth and the value that we all have as women. And he encourage them all not to allow anyone to rob them of their self-worth or tell them that they aren't worthy of respect and the love that they deserve. And it was just very touching. In their culture, women don't really have much of a voice. So we were then teaching them and encouraging them to say no if someone was trying to do something to them that they didn't want. And if no didn't work, then Alyssa showed about 4 different basic self-defense moves that they could use and practice. And it was really empowering. we could just tell. And Scott asked toward the end of his talk, how many of you have dreams? And no one raised their hands except for the women in purple in the back, the doTERRA representatives. And he asked it again, and he explained what he meant by that. And still, only a couple of people raised their hands. And it's just not something that they're taught in their culture. They're not taught that they're especially valuable, that they have worth as women. They're kind of taught that they are meant to exist simply to make tortillas and wash clothes and have babies, and there's nothing wrong with that if that's a life that a woman chooses and wants. But he wanted them to know that they're making the right choice by going to school, and that they have other opportunities if they want to pursue other vocations, and that above all, whether they choose to be a housewife and stay in their region and have a family, that or they choose to go to a city and have a job, or whatever they might choose to do, that they needed to know that they have choices and that they have value and that they should have dreams. And that was just a message you could tell that they don't get a lot. So it was a really beautiful thing to be a part of, such an honor. And the women then were given their kits, and they were extremely grateful for that. And we tried to make it fun. Abby and I were in a group together teaching about 10 women, and our group had it was all younger moms. Like, there were a few babies and toddlers in our group, and so they weren't the young schoolgirls, but we had moms who were probably actually closer to our ages, somewhere between 30 and 40, and had small children. And we tried to make it fun. So, I actually put we showed them how to put the pad on the underwear, and made a couple of them show us back. So they were reluctant to do that, but they did. Eventually, a couple of them did show us that they did know how to use them. And then I put the underwear on over my pants to make sure that they understood, because honestly, some of them may have never seen underwear before, and it made them all giggle. And it was fun. We tried to really be relatable, and I tried my best to translate into Spanish. And some of them don't even speak Spanish, so it was tricky. You can see on the left picture, we had a local intern, or a girl. She's actually from America, but she was there studying for several weeks and as an intern, and she was translating into Spanish from what Alyssa was saying. And then over on the right, a local Quechua girl was translating into her local dialect, and it was quite an interesting chain. She was really put on the spot. Marissa in the blue had a chance to practice, and so did Alyssa. But that girl, that 18-year-old girl on the right, she was strong. She had to figure out how to translate words like cervix and talk about that in front of her peers, and talk about women's bodies. So it was empowering, though. You could just tell that it was empowering for her to be teaching women who are even much older than she is about these things, and teaching these concepts to this class of 100 women. I can imagine that she will go on to be quite a leader in her community. All right, so then we did have time to interact and paint fingernails, and we got to just hang out with them and talk to the girls, and there were boys there too, and they did interact with some of the men that went with us. And we were saying, and I think this is something that they hear a lot, there needs to be a days for boys, because there needs to be something for the boys to do other than just kind of play kickball or whatever, and they need to have some kind of empowering education as well. Of course, they don't need the sanitary kits, but there's other things that they need to know and to learn about. And I think there's something brewing with that, about teaching the young men while we're teaching the women about their dignity, teaching the men about their dignity and how to treat each other and the women in their communities with dignity. So this is just one of the more special memories to us, though, is getting to participate in this. And this, again, is a school where children walk 3 to 4 hours oftentimes to get to school, because it's the closest school in their area, and it's that important to their families that they get education, and they're the first in their families to receive an education. So they might not get home until 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and then they have to leave their homes at 4 or 5 o'clock the next morning to get to school. So like Abby said, it made our sacrifice of a 12-hour bus ride through windy roads where we felt nauseated and just couldn't wait to get off the dirt roads and get the dirt out of our hair and things. It just made it seem like a small sacrifice just to come and remind them that people care about them and that they really have that value and are special. All right, so the kind of last stop for us was with our distillation partner. So doTERRA has a private and exclusive relationship with this distiller, so I will be careful not to show or mention their name or logo. But 85% of our oils are obtained through exclusive agreements. So no one else has the same essential oils that we do, and our goal is to get to 100%. So no one else has even close to 85% of exclusivity in their partnerships, but our goal is to get to 100%, and we are working toward that. So the chain of supply here goes from the farmer. He sells his pods to the co-op in his community area. The co-op buys and dries them at that drying facility and then sells to the distiller. The distiller has a partner that they use to sort the pods. So they're sorting for quality, size, and color, and they bag them in different color of bags based on their quality, size, and color. And then the distiller tests the bulk oil and sends samples of that bulk oil to doTERRA, followed by 180 kilogram drums of the oil. So that's kind of the supply chain. The dried pods, when they reach the distiller and have completely dried, they are called pergamino. I just think that's a beautiful word for dried cardamom pods, pergamino. Anyway, so here is some of what happens next. So there is a grinder that smashes open the pod just enough so that steam can get in and distill the oil. So it takes 15 of the 100-pound bags to fill the still. You can see the still on the bottom right. And it takes about 30 minutes for them to fill that still. They distill it immediately so that they don't lose any of the vapors. And then it takes 5.5 hours to completely distill it. So just some facts here and figures. It's 1,500 pounds of raw material. There's a 4.5% yield of essential oil. There's 30 kilos or 67.5 pounds of oil per batch that they distill. It is delivered to doTERRA in the 180 kilo drums, which you can see on that picture on the left, kind of up behind Abby. There's up on the upper level, the big black drums or barrels. That's what it's delivered to doTERRA in. It's way in the back there, so you probably just see blackness, but that's what those are. So each batch that they distill fills about 1/6 of a drum. And there are 6,700 bottles approximately of essential oil. So the 5 milliliter bottles is what we use for cardamom per batch. And there's around 40,500 bottles of oil from each of those big drums. And that's how it is delivered to doTERRA. So we, again, were, the oil geeks, like jumping up and down. And over here on the far left is Dr. Parker. Dr. Tori Parker is the head of research and development. And he was at convention last year, if you were there. He was on stage with his wife and 5 sons, and they all had the little white lab coats and glasses. They were so adorable, but he was just freaking out over the science and chemistry and being at a distillation facility. It was his first trip as well to a distillation facility. So he was super excited, and he was teaching us so much all week. I just really wanted to follow him around with a recorder and record all of the amazing things he had to say about the science of everything. So anyway, so how this works, you can kind of see on that top left picture, those are the stills. So you saw them being filled from the top, and that's how deep they are. That's how tall they are, is from the ground floor up to that top level. And again, that's 1,500 pounds of dried material. And steam is injected under pressure from the bottom. All of the pipes, all of the equipment are stainless steel, which is very expensive, but very important for the quality of our essential oil that we require. So the oil first comes off, as you see in the bottom left, as both oil and water. So it's in a vapor together. And then as the oil continues to be distilled, it gradually grows darker in color. So there's different grades of oil along the way. The lighter notes come out first because they are the smallest molecules, and then the oil gets heavier. And after distillation, the distiller re-blends the oil. And our distiller, actually, he was telling us, he said it's very difficult because crops are different each year, but doTERRA requires the same quality and the same blend each year. So they work really hard to match our exact profile needs through this distillation process, which was truly just fascinating to see. All right. So when it first is distilled, there's a note that they call the still note, and it smells kind of burned and a little nutty. I mean, it still smells like cardamom, but there's this note that you catch that's this burnt, nutty smell, but it evaporates off. And there's a whole proprietary process and a whole part of the building that we weren't allowed to go into because it's like a clean room, a laboratory, and they have, proprietary stuff there, and it has to be completely sterile where they actually um, put the oil after the still note evaporates off into the batches and drums for us. So, but the distillation facility, I have to say, was really impressive. It was so clean, and they run a completely closed system, which was neat to see, and it just falls right in line with doTERRA's philosophy as well. So the water from the steam distillation process is collected and recycled. So they use that over and over, whereas a lot of distillation facilities just kind of let that water run off down the hillside or wherever. At this distillation facility, they also make their own methane gas. So they use the leftover cardamom pods after they're distilled, along with compost. And in the bottom right picture, you can see that's what they call their biodigester. So they create their own methane to power the boiler to create the steam for the steam distillation process. And so it's a really clean and green operation there. And we did have some traveling and sightseeing. We basically had a full day to see Antigua, and I'm personally just really glad that our distiller is in that general region because it's such a beautiful and fascinating area. This is the Santa Catalina Arch in Antigua, built in the 17th century. We got to stay at the Casa Santo Domingo Hotel. Rob Young insisted that we stay there. I guess that Abby's group last year, where Rob Young was on the trip, got to eat there, but they didn't stay there. And he said we had to stay there. And they actually booked the whole trip around dates that the hotel had open. And it was not disappointing. It's been repeatedly voted the best hotel in Central America. It's absolutely beautiful. It's got wonderful food and fascinating history and architecture all throughout the hotel. So we really had great food and accommodations everywhere we went. I brought a whole bunch of gluten-free granola bars just in case. And the only times I ate them were on the airplane, on the way there and on the way back. We had more than enough food, and it was excellent. doTERRA really takes good care of you on these trips, and it was fun to have a full day to explore Antigua. We had to get up at, again, 3:30 in the morning, get on a 4 o'clock bus in order to do it. And they kept telling us, you will thank us when we get there. You'll thank us when we get there. It's a beautiful, amazing city. And they were not wrong. So here are just a few of the other sites in the area, more just lovely shots of Antigua, including the Volcán de Fuego, the volcano up on the top right. So we did see several of the volcanoes around the country. And I just kind of wanted to summarize all of this by saying it was so worth it. So just seeing our Healing Hands dollars at work, knowing that every penny given to Healing Hands goes directly to the projects and the efforts that we got to see firsthand, it made me want to come home and just shout from the rooftops that we all need to be donating that $1 through our monthly orders every month. And also ordering the rose lotion and the Hope oil blend. Both of those, they each cost $20, and all 20 of those dollars go directly to Healing Hands. And Alyssa, the events coordinator, made note of the fact that anything extra we did, like we had to stay an extra night in a hotel because there was some protesting going on at a mine, and they thought it would be dangerous for us to pass through that area. So we waited until the next day, and hence one of the 4 o'clock in the morning bus rides that was not supposed to be at 4 o'clock in the morning, but she was just commenting that she wanted us to know it was not Healing Hands dollars paying for any of that for us. It was the events department at doTERRA paying for that she has extra set aside in her budget for unforeseen circumstances with travel, and that she does not get to touch Healing Hands dollars for these trips, that comes from doTERRA. And that is their commitment. Even the staff that works for Healing Hands at doTERRA is not paid by Healing Hands. They are paid by doTERRA, and all of the doTERRA Healing Hands Foundation money goes to these projects. So, of course, I loved seeing the entire oil production process from seedling to distillation. That was awesome. It made me love and respect doTERRA's founders even more because, quite honestly, this is the hard and expensive way to get essential oils. It would be so much easier and cheaper just to buy a big farm and employ people to work it. And doTERRA could cut so many corners and so many costs, like most of the industry does and has always done. But by refusing to budge on our standards, instead, we're changing a whole industry. We're changing the lives of small farmers, and we've changed the quality of essential oils. So, seeing the dignity and hope restored to growers and getting to meet them face to face and see their communities and how it has changed their communities is truly so special and so beautiful. So the logistics of these trips, it is a first come, first serve kind of thing. Like Abby said last year, she just walked up to the Healing Hands table at convention and asked, and they let her put down a deposit right then and there. They do sort of an auction sort of a process now where it's not an auction. What do you call it? They do a drawing, I guess, and they call people as their names are drawn. And so everybody who's interested, at convention that puts their name in, they supposedly were going to just draw them out. And if you got drawn, then you had the option to go if you were ready to put down your $500 deposit. But then we found out actually that they just decided to call everybody who entered and give them an opportunity to go. And that if there were too many people, they would just create more trips. So I think that's a great problem to have. And they have trips to different places coming up. So there is Nepal for the second time. They're going back to Nepal in May. They're taking a trip to Kenya. And that first one will just be for blue and presidential diamonds this fall. But the hope is to have repeat trips to these areas. They are doing trips to Bulgaria now, where we have the distillation of lavender and melissa going on. So we saw some of those videos at convention, and those are on YouTube as well at the Esoterra distillation facility. So there's different options coming up. Guatemala will continue to be an option. Guatemala is probably the most affordable trip. So you do pay $2,000 total for your trip, and then you do buy your own airfare. And there is a list of supplies that you need. It's not really extensive. Most of it you probably have, but you do have some things that you probably have to purchase to be ready to go on the trip. So you have to budget that, and you don't really need to have a food budget. All of our meals were provided. We did choose to go out to a restaurant once just because we wanted to experience it, and we paid for that ourselves. But we brought some snacks, and we didn't end up needing them. Alyssa had all the snacks we needed, really, and really we just had souvenirs is all that we purchased. So I would definitely say it is worth it, and it was such an amazing experience. We had a wonderful team of wellness advocates, corporate representatives, and staff. So our corporate representatives were Russell Butters and his wife, and he is the VP of sales. He is the one who replaced Rich Higbee recently. And then we had Dr. Parker, whom I mentioned already, and we had the events coordinator, the head of the events department, Alyssa Balzati. Those were our corporate team members. They also sent a photographer with us, which was really fun to have. A lot of these pictures he did take. And then Choice Humanitarian staff was there, and we had a medic. So they sent an EMT with us as well, just in case we needed his services traveling to these remote areas. So again, they take really good care of us. And it was such a wonderful experience, and I highly recommend it. And I have not let Abby get a word in edgewise here, but Abby, I would love if you would like to say anything to wrap up, then please feel free to do so. Let me see if I have you unmuted still. I don't know how you got muted again. I'm sorry. You probably were trying to talk the whole time, and I don't know when you got muted again.
That's okay. No, you did a great job of explaining everything. I mean, I tend to talk a lot more about the feels than the actual things that we needed there. So, but yeah, I don't know. It was an amazing trip. If anybody can go on a doTERRA trip, you should go. I mean, yes, the villagers, all of that, I've been on enough mission trips and that was wonderful. But even from an oil standpoint, like holding the cardamom in my hand and eating the seeds and walking into the distillery and smelling it and just seeing that whole process is just so cool. And to see how specific everything is, it's mind-boggling to know that they do that with every single oil.
Yeah.
And make those very specific chemical compounds and everything. So
mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I'm really sorry you got muted again. I don't know how that happened.
That's okay.
But when I'm showing a PowerPoint, I can't see all of my controls. And so I didn't notice that it had automatically muted you again. So. But thank you for being here. I am going to stop the recording, but then I'm going to wait a few minutes and see if anybody has questions. So thanks for those who are watching the recording as well, and for everyone who joined us live. It's been a pleasure to get to share this with you. And like Abby said, I like to get into all of the logistics and the specifics, and I took a lot of notes on that kind of stuff because I think that's super fascinating and fun, but really just the experience and all the feels, like she said, just it's overwhelming. It's just so wonderful to interact with the people and live in that moment and be totally unplugged right away from internet and cell phone service, and just to be with each other and with the people, and to experience cardamom and all that Choice and both Choice and doTERRA are doing together. So it was awesome. I hope you all go. And thanks for joining us.